Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty simple. We take your source material, the articles, the research, notes you've gathered, and really dig out the most important nuggets, the insights, the stuff that helps you get genuinely well-informed fast.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're looking at sources connected to Dr. Meg John Barker's book, Rewriting the Rules, which is subtitled An Anti-Self-Help Guide to Love, Sex, and Relationships. And we're also drawing from their website, rewriting-the-rules.com.
Okay, so our goal today, to figure out what these sources are telling us about, well, navigating modern relationships, love, sex, it all feels pretty complicated sometimes. And this really powerful idea that maybe we can actually define these things for ourselves.
Yeah, the material really sets the scene first. It acknowledges that a lot of us feel this real uncertainty around relationships today. You might be looking for the one, maybe finding yourself single, or going through breakups that just feel messy and confusing.
Right. And the advice we get seems all over the place.
Totally. Often contradictory advice, you know?
It feels like the old maps just don't quite fit the territory anymore. And that seems to be exactly where this material comes in with a different angle. It's framed not as your standard self-help book with all the answers, but as an anti-self guide. More like a friendly guide through the complexity, maybe? Not telling you the one right way.
That's a great way to put it. And it leads straight into the core question the sources raise. With so many options now for how to love, how to connect, how do you even start choosing which rules make sense for you?
Do you stick with what you grew up with, even if it feels a bit tight?
Yeah. Or do you try something new, which can feel risky, maybe isolating?
Yeah.
And the sources ask, what if the rules you are trying to follow actually seem to be making things, well, worse?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The core idea, the thread running through these sources, seems to be that the power is actually with you. You get to write the rules for your love life, your sex life, your relationships.
Yes. It's not offering one single alternative path, but laying out a whole spectrum of choices, possibilities for how you might want to connect with others. It's quite a perspective shift.
It really is. So how does that break down? Where are these rules being questioned?
Well, the sources kind of map it out following the structure of the book itself. It talks about rewriting the rules of yourself first.
Yeah.
That love, sex, gender, monogamy.
Wow, okay. So pretty fundamental stuff.
Absolutely. And conflict, breakup, even commitment. All these areas are up for reexamination.
Can you give some examples? Like, how does this actually look in the real world according to the sources?
Sure. So they mentioned people exploring relationship styles like being monogamish or maybe fully polyamorous relationships. Basically, consciously designing how they connect, moving beyond just traditional monogamy as the only option.
Okay.
And they also dig into different ways people are understanding sex and gender now, questioning those rigid male-female binaries.
Right, that makes sense. What about the harder stuff like breakups?
Yeah, and that's really important. The sources offer different ways to think about managing commitment and relationship endings, especially in situations where that sort of clean break isn't really possible or even desirable, maybe because of finances or kids or shared communities.
Ah, okay. Navigating those complexities with more intention.
Exactly, with more agency.
And looking at the author's website, the topics mentioned there really show how broad this is, right? The sources point to things like dominant and submissive dynamics, BDSM, the wheel of consent,
Challenging heteronormativity, LGBT plus mental health.
non-monogamy, non-binary genders, key ideas from therapy. It seems really comprehensive.
It is. And there's mention of a TED Talk by the author on rewriting relationship rules, plus free resources like Zins. It shows this isn't just theory, It connects to lived experiences across a huge range of human connection.
So it's about providing tools and language, not prescriptions.
Precisely. Tools to explore your possibilities. And Dr. Meg John Barker brings a lot to the table here. The sources highlight their background drawing on therapy experience, academic research, and work within communities. It's grounded.
And what about critics or other experts mentioned in the sources? What do they add?
Well, Dossie Easton's perspective is mentioned. She emphasizes that if you are the one writing the rules, well, that brings amazing freedom, yes. But she also points out it comes with significant responsibility. It's not necessarily easy.
That's a really important counterbalance, freedom and responsibility.
Definitely. And Esther Perel is also quoted. She calls the book sharp, insightful, open-minded, and just a wonderfully friendly guide. She says it's like navigating the mazes of modern love, and that Meg's writing is like a benevolent friend whose hand you don't want to let go.
That paints a really vivid picture. Supportive, but still sharp and insightful.
Yeah, it sounds like a really helpful companion for these big questions.
So let's bring it back to you, the listener. Why should you care about this deep dive? Why does this matter?
Well, I think it offers a way to maybe make sense of some of that relationship confusion many of us feel.
Right. And it opens your eyes to possibilities, approaches that go way beyond the sort of standard scripts we often inherit.
It definitely prompts you to question assumptions, doesn't it? Things you might just take for granted about relationships.
Absolutely. And ultimately, the perspective we're getting from these sources is really about empowerment. It suggests you have the ability to explore and maybe build ways of connecting that genuinely fit you, your life, your circumstances, instead of feeling like you have to, contort yourself to fit into some pre-existing mold that just doesn't work.
Right. When you really sit with that idea that the rules aren't fixed, that you have a hand in writing them, what does that open up for you?
It really changes the game. From trying to get it right by someone else's standards to figuring out what right actually means and feels like for you and your connections.
Yeah, it really does. So if we're wrapping up our deep dive into this material, I think the main takeaway is this. Navigating modern relationships, with all their uncertainty, isn't really about finding the perfect external rulebook.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, the sources suggest the power lies in understanding the options out there and then consciously choosing what works best for your life, your connections.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to maybe chew on. If, like these sources propose, you are the one who gets to write the rules for your relationships, what existing rules might you be following right now just by default? Rules you've maybe never really stopped to question.
And, just thinking hypothetically, what might that first small step look like? If you were to begin the process consciously of defining your own vision for connection, what would that involve for you?